You didn't get there in time. Maybe you were finishing dinner. Maybe you were in the bathroom. Maybe you were just exhausted, and you paused for 30 seconds before you got up. And now you're wondering if you just did something you can't undo. Here's what no one is telling you clearly enough. The answer to that question is already written inside your baby's brain, and it's far more forgiving than the internet would have you believe. But there is a real neuroscience story here, and understanding it will change the way you respond, not because you're scared, but because you actually understand what's happening inside that tiny skull. Stay with this, because the middle section is where everything shifts. The thing most parenting content gets completely backwards about stress in babies. We're going to take that apart piece by piece. Your baby was born with a stress response system that is, in the most literal biological sense, incomplete. Adults have what's called the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. When something threatening happens, this system fires. The hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland. The pituitary signals the adrenal glands. Cortisol floods the bloodstream. Heart rate climbs. Attention sharpens. The body prepares. It is a masterpiece of biological engineering. Your newborn has this same system. Every single component is present and functional from birth. But here's the critical difference. The part of the brain responsible for regulating that stress response, bringing it back down after the threat has passed, is not finished being built yet. The prefrontal cortex, the brain region most involved in calming the stress system back down, is one of the last structures to fully develop. We're talking years, not months. So what does that mean in practical terms? It means your baby can fire up a cortisol response just fine. What your baby cannot do at all is turn it off alone. That is not a flaw. That is the design. Evolution built infants this way specifically because the solution to an infant's stress was always meant to come from outside the infant, from you. When your baby cries and you don't come immediately, the stress system activates. Cortisol rises. That's not a catastrophe. It's a biological signal working exactly as intended. The question that actually matters is, what happens next? And the answer to that question has everything to do with a concept called co-regulation, which is where this gets genuinely fascinating. Co-regulation is the process by which one nervous system calms another. When you pick up your crying baby, hold them against your chest, speak in a low, rhythmic voice, and sway. You are not just comforting them emotionally. You are literally lending them your nervous system. Your regulated heartbeat entrains their heart rate. Your slow, steady breathing influences theirs. The warmth of your skin triggers a cascade of neurochemical responses in your baby. Oxytocin release, cortisol suppression, a return toward baseline. Developmental researchers, including the foundational work of Alan Shore at UCLA, have described the mother-infant dyad, and by extension any primary caregiver-infant pair, as a single regulatory unit, not two separate nervous systems. One shared system, where the more regulated partner does the heavy lifting for the less regulated one. This is why your calm matters so much. Not your perfect timing, your calm. A parent who arrives 30 seconds late, but is genuinely warm and present and regulated, will do more for that baby's stress system than a parent who arrives immediately, but is tense, distracted, and anxious. Be honest with yourself right now. How often have you rushed to your baby while your own nervous system was still spinning? Drop a 1 in the comments if you've been there, because this next part is for you. The quality of the co-regulation matters more than the speed of the response. That doesn't mean speed is irrelevant. We'll get to what chronic delay actually does. But the popular narrative that every second of delay is a second of permanent damage is not what the research shows. What the research shows is that the emotional quality of the repair is the variable that matters most. And that single reframe, that's worth more than any parenting book you've ever bought. In the 1970s, developmental psychologist Ed Tronick ran what became one of the most replicated and most unsettling experiments in infant research. He called it the still face paradigm. The setup was simple. A mother interacts warmly with her infant, smiling, talking, mirroring expressions. The baby responds with delight. Then on cue, the mother goes completely blank. No expression, no response, just a neutral, still face. Within seconds, the baby tries everything, points, vocalizes, reaches, tries to re-engage. When nothing works, the infant turns away, slumps, and begins to show clear signs of distress. Even though nothing physically threatening has happened, the mother is right there. Then the mother re-engages, and within moments, the baby recovers. What Tronick was documenting was the serve and return cycle, the back and forth exchange of cues and responses between caregiver and infant that neuroscientists now recognize as the primary driver of early brain architecture. Every time your baby makes a sound, a gesture, a facial expression, and you respond, a neural connection is either formed or strengthened. The Harvard Center on the Developing Child has described this process as the single most important factor in building the brain's architecture in the first years of life. Not educational toys, not black and white flashcards, not any program or curriculum. This, the back and forth, the noticing and responding. And here's the part that matters for your guilt at 3 a.m. The still face experiment also showed that brief disruptions, followed by warm repair, did not damage the infant. In fact, Tronick himself argued that the repair process may be as developmentally important as the connection itself. Learning that disconnection is temporary, that the caregiver comes back, that stress resolves, that is a lesson the brain needs to learn. The rupture is not the problem. The rupture without repair is the problem. This is the section most parenting content either skips entirely or gets catastrophically wrong. There is a line, and it matters enormously where that line sits. Occasional non-response, the delayed pickup, the missed cue, the moment you didn't catch the early hunger signal before the full meltdown, does not cause lasting harm to a developing brain. The research on this is consistent. Parenting that is good enough, a term the pediatrician and psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott introduced decades ago, is not just adequate. It may be optimal, because perfect attunement, if it were even possible, would not prepare a child for a world that is sometimes unresponsive. Chronic non-response is a different category entirely. When a baby's stress signals are consistently ignored, not occasionally, not sometimes, but routinely across the primary relationship over weeks and months, the cortisol system does not just spike and recover, it stays elevated. And chronically elevated cortisol in early infancy has documented effects on brain development that are serious and real. Research in developmental neuroscience has shown that prolonged early stress exposure can affect the density of connections in the hippocampus, the brain region central to memory and learning, and can alter the sensitivity of the HPA axis itself, making the stress system either hyperreactive or blunted in ways that persist into childhood and beyond. This is the neuroscience of neglect, and it is real. But, and this is the part you need to hear, neglect is not a missed bedtime pickup. Neglect is not a parent who is sometimes tired, sometimes slow, sometimes overwhelmed. Neglect is the consistent chronic absence of a responsive relationship. That is a fundamentally different thing from imperfect parenting. If you're watching this video worried about whether you're doing enough, you are almost certainly not in that category. The parents who are chronically unresponsive are generally not the ones researching infant neuroscience at midnight. If that hits something real for you, leave a like, because I want to know this is reaching the people who need it. What we've covered so far, the HPA axis, co-regulation, the still face, the chronic versus occasional distinction. This is the foundation, the neuroscience of what's already happening. What comes next is where it gets practical, because understanding the brain is one thing. Knowing what to actually do with that understanding in the middle of a real day with a real baby is another thing entirely. If this kind of evidence-based zero-guilt content is what you've been looking for, subscribing takes 1 second and means you'll see it when we go deeper. Because what I'm about to show you about the window of repair and the one thing that matters more than response time, that's where this whole conversation changes. Here is something that almost never makes it into parenting content, and it should. The repair window, the period after a stressful non-response during which a warm, attuned reconnection can fully resolve the cortisol spike and restore the baby's sense of safety, is not a matter of seconds. For young infants, cortisol following a stressful event can remain elevated for 20 to 30 minutes. That is not a window. That is a door left wide open. What this means practically: if you were in the shower and your baby cried for 4 minutes before you got there, arriving warm, calm, and genuinely present is not too late. The biology is still waiting for you. The repair is still fully available. The research on sensitive responsiveness, a term used in attachment literature to describe the quality of caregiver response rather than its speed, consistently shows that what predicts secure attachment is not zero latency response. It is the consistent pattern of signal, response, resolution, signal, response, resolution. Your baby is not keeping score in seconds. Your baby is building a model of the world, a working model in attachment theory terms, based on the overall pattern of their experience with you. Is this a world where my needs get met? Is this a person who comes back? Is distress temporary? Those questions get answered over hundreds and thousands of interactions, not one, not 10. This is also why the language you use when you arrive matters. Coming in hot, anxious, apologetic, overstimulating can actually extend the cortisol response rather than resolve it. Coming in calm, low-voiced, warm, and physically steady, that is the co-regulation signal the nervous system is waiting for. You are the regulation, not your speed. You. Let's talk about what all of this is actually building toward. The concept of attachment security, developed by John Bowlby and later operationalized by Mary Ainsworth through her strange situation research, describes the internal working model a child builds about relationships based on early caregiver responsiveness. Securely attached children, those whose caregivers were generally responsive and reliable, show a consistent profile as they develop. They explore more confidently because they trust the caregiver is available. They recover from stress more quickly. They show stronger language development, better emotional regulation, and more positive peer relationships in the preschool years and beyond. Here is what often gets lost in the attachment conversation. Ainsworth's own data showed that roughly 60 to 65% of children in low-risk populations develop secure attachment. That means the majority of parents, ordinary, imperfect, sometimes tired parents, are doing enough. And critically, secure attachment does not require perfect responsiveness. Ainsworth's research showed that what distinguished secure from insecure attachment was not the absence of misattunement. It was the ratio of connection to disconnection and the reliability of repair. Some people think attachment parenting means being physically available every single moment. Others think it just means following your instincts. I think both of those miss the actual science, and I'd genuinely love to know where you land. Tell me in the comments, do you think modern parenting culture makes attachment feel more or less achievable than it actually is? What Ainsworth's strange situation also showed, and this rarely gets discussed, is that the insecure attachment patterns she documented were not fixed life sentences. Subsequent research has consistently found that responsive new relationships, even in childhood and adolescence, can update a child's internal working model. The brain is not a photograph taken in infancy. It is a document being continuously edited. That is not a loophole. That is the design. Everything we've covered, the HPA axis, co-regulation, serve and return, the repair window, attachment security, it all points to the same practical conclusion. Responsiveness is not about perfection. It is about pattern. So here is what the neuroscience actually asks of you, translated into the texture of a real day. First, respond to distress before you respond to the distress. The earliest cues, rooting, hand-to-mouth movements, small fussing sounds before a full cry, are the biological equivalent of a low-volume signal. Catching them early means a lower cortisol spike, an easier regulation process, and a baby who learns that the system works before it has to escalate. You won't catch them every time. Catch them when you can. Second, when you do arrive late, arrive regulated. Take one breath before you pick them up. Not because your baby can smell panic, though your baby absolutely can read tension in your body and voice, but because your nervous system is the tool. A calm arrival does more neurobiological work than a fast one. Third, narrate the repair. I hear you. I'm here. You're okay. Not because your 3-month-old understands the words, because the slow, low, rhythmic quality of that speech pattern activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the calm and connect branch in both of you. The words are a delivery mechanism for the prosody. The prosody is the medicine. Fourth, don't catastrophize the cry. A baby who cries is a baby whose stress system is working correctly. The cry is not evidence of damage. The cry is the signal the system was designed to send. Your job is not to prevent the signal. Your job is to be the resolution. And fifth, and I want you to actually sit with this one, Your own regulation is a gift to your child's brain. Every time you manage your own stress, repair your own nervous system, and return to your baby from a place of genuine calm rather than frantic guilt, you are doing neuroscience. You are doing the most important neuroscience available to you. If you know a parent who needs to hear that their imperfection is not the same as harm, send them this video right now, because that message is not getting through loudly enough. The science is not asking you to be a different parent. It is asking you to understand what you're already doing and do it with a little more intention and a lot less fear. If you've made it this far, you're not a passive consumer of parenting content. You're someone who actually wants to understand the science behind what you're doing every single day. That's exactly who this channel exists for. Subscribe, because we go this deep every week. The neuroscience of sleep, the developmental meaning of tantrums, what your baby's eye contact is actually telling you. This is the work we do here. 1 second to subscribe, and you won't have to find this kind of content by accident again. Your baby's brain is not counting your delays. It is counting your returns, and you keep coming back. That's the whole story. Thanks for watching. The end screen has more videos in the same world. Thanks for being here. Pick whichever video on the end screen calls to you.